3, 2, 1. Hello, everyone. It's Kenyon here. Basketball Rewind. We are here right before the end of the week, coming to you with a mailbag episode with some stuff to talk about. We're going to just jump right into it. Coach, obviously Beyond, they're both joining me. How are you guys doing?
Well, I tell you, you guys aren't actually privy to the stuff beforehand, man. No, boy, it's spicy. I just leave it at
that. There's some more spiciness. We'll talk about it later, but there's some developmental notes to discuss. But for you, the listener, we got to get into this week. The week is not over yet as of the filming of this, so it is an incomplete week. The Cavs game is looming. So I'm just gonna say they got at least 2 wins by the time this comes out, and I'll leave it at that. We can talk about the wins if you guys want to, because it is kind of a little bit interesting to talk about the wins. But also, we got Scottie Barnes back, Superman with his cape on, or Batman if you like that. Beyond, I'm going to go to you first. Your thoughts on...
Let Coach go first.
I was going to let Coach go after because, RJ played a big part in the last win. So that yeah, exactly. So that is method to my madness. Beyond.
All right. My apologies, sir. You're conducting this orchestra. Don't do it. I'll just say this. First thing, yeah, we should talk about it. I mean, they won 2 games, which these days is quite fleeting. So we should actually enjoy the moments when they do win games. So, good for the boys. As far as what came out of the wins, I made a joke to you earlier this week. I said, I guess development's out the window now. I told you guys offline or a podcast before the season started, and we talked about this coach, and they were talking about, we're talking about development. The R word came up in this case here from the side multiple times. Heck, even Pearl mentioned it and stuff like that. Even though people like to deny it, he actually said it bold-faced. And I said to you guys...
I respect him for that.
Yeah, hell yeah. I got much respect for Pearl. As I told you then, before they even had the announcements, I said, you want to find out what the real deal is? Wait for the Pearl interview. That's what I told you. Wait for the Pearl interview. Then you'll know what the pulse of the team is. Anyhow, as far as the game goes, these 2 games that we had, props to the boys. But I said at the time with Darko is like every other coach was all said and done. He can put on a nice smile. He can talk about this, that, and how warm and fuzzy he is about these players and stuff like that. But coach knows this. The instinct of a coach is to win. It is like survival. It is like air, breathing air. Don't matter how much stuff they're worried about. We're not worried about the wins and losses yet. At some point, decisions will be made because they need to get W's. I said to you guys a week ago, after they lost that game in the back-to-backs in Los Angeles, and I saw Darko's face after they lost the Lakers, and that man looked like dead man walking. Since that happened, I always say, we just mentioned just before we came on the air, watch the minutes, people. Watch how the game's actually being conducted. All of a sudden now, it seems like the development that I didn't realize I was aware of, we were starting to develop Chris Boucher and Jakob Poeltl. That seems to be the development we're doing now. Look at the shot attempts and look at the minutes, as I said before. Those are the numbers you need to look at. And I don't know. This might be a short-term strategy, a strategy for short-term success, but I don't think it's good for the long run of this team. I think it's detrimental for this team to have Pearl get like 15 to 16 shots a night and say, for example, Grady getting 8 or 9. I don't think that's wise. Fair enough for all you guys in this case here. I must admit I'm a little more down about Mogbo, but for the Mogbo lovers out there, if Boucher is eating up more minutes than Mogbo and we're doing development supposedly, that's not great. So when it's all said and done, like all this development BS and stuff they're telling you about, this franchise, I find, man, I tell you, man, they find ways to make life hard for themselves. But we'll see. I said before, the way the team's constructed, the way they have when it comes to the coaching staff, I still feel really confident that they are what they are, even with a couple wins this week, pending what's going to happen tonight. So I'll leave it there. Coach, I'll let you talk about your man, Star J.
Mr. Bear, Mr. RJ Bear, Star J Bear, man, is he trying to be an all-star this year? I think this all started with the Detroit game because he had a few games about a week and a half ago where he was struggling, especially on the West Coast. But ever since he's come back to the East Coast, he had 22, 6, and 7 against Detroit. He had a triple-double against Boston. And let's know, RJ was number one option in that game. 25, 10, and 15. Against Indiana, almost a 40-point game. So he had 39, 9 rebounds, and 5 assists. He's been playing a lot more point, let's just call it for what it is, especially when Scottie was out. It's been him kind of feeding Pirtle a lot in the mid-post and in the key. And he had 31, 7, and 3 steals against Minnesota on very high efficiency. Mr. Barrett is really playing good basketball so far to start this year. I think he's averaging about 24 points. Just have to get it up here again. He's averaging 24 points, almost 7 rebounds, and 6 assists. Now, especially the scoring output, that's really good. I keep saying I want a guy who can get us 25 to 30 a game. I don't know if that's RJ in the conventional sense. I think most guys who get that 25 to 30, they have other ways of trying to get that, more so like some of them are really good three-point shooters, for example, or they have a really good pull-up game in the mid-range. And RJ doesn't really have that. He's a very good stationary shooter. We know what he could do getting to the rim. If he starts hitting more free throws, that he probably will get to actually that 25 to 30. But for what he's had to do, for what he's had to step in to do with all the injuries this year, I don't know if you can ask for much better from RJ Barrett. And this has been a continuation from last year right until now. He's going left. You know he's going left. And he's scoring going left. It's like everybody knows that he's going left and they still can't stop. It's the same a little bit with Randall when Randall was in New York.
I will say this. I'll give him credit. Last week, though, he has kind of gone right a couple times on folks. We kind of caught them off guard. And he has pulled up a few mid-range shots, which is like, oh, I remember one of the reverse pivot. He hit kind of a pseudo type of like awkward type of fadeaway, or I guess kind of was flat-footed for a second, but it went in. But he is starting to kind of add elements to his game on that front. It's unfortunate our offense isn't actually pro for like post-ups. I think he actually would be very good in that scenario, but unfortunately, we just throw that out for lunch because I think we would have a couple of guys that would be good in those scenarios, especially when they get played with smaller guys. I've already mentioned with Grady. I think RJ would be in the same boat, but I've mentioned it a million times with Scottie. I've given up on post-ups in this team. So that's like, it is what it is. But yeah. He's thrown some different things, Coach, in the last week, which makes me wonder to answer your question, can he get it more conventional than we think in the future?
Good question. And he's also averaging, he's got 53% true shooting, 34% from 3. I think some of those numbers went down in some of those really bad games out west because he's getting a lot more shots, more volume. I suspect now that Scottie's back, some of his efficiencies will go up because Scottie will draw a little bit more from the defense and RJ will have a bit more space to work with, even though it's funny because it's not like Scottie's going to draw a bunch of double teams towards him. But if Scottie's in the post, I don't worry about him. He has a good tendency of finding guys that are open, whether it be RJ or like you had said earlier, Grady. They got to find that guy a bit more, especially in the last game against Minnesota. There was a 6-minute stretch where he took one shot. I know our guy Mouth of the North. He didn't like that. I sure didn't like it either.
He had one field goal attempt a quarter inch in the game. And yes. Over a quarter and a half, I say they forgot this guy's on the court. And then next commercial break, they came back. I don't know if it was the coach or Grady said, like, screw it, I'm just going to jack up 5 shots before the end of the half. And like, oh, they realize they have this guy on the team.
And RJ, 71% from the field against Minnesota. The guy was going at the rim. They couldn't stop him, even with a guy like Gobert on the floor. There was a move that he had, and it's been shown quite a bit on the clips. They had a switch off where Gobert was guarding him around the elbow, and RJ drove, pulled back. Gobert fought the fate, and then RJ just flew by him after that and laid it in. There's no contest. So anytime you're able to do that against the big, whether it's Gobert or even it's a Pirtle, like big guys like that, when you're able to get that switch off, man, there's layups there to be found.
No, those are great points. I'll just quickly say one of the things to keep in mind is that the majority of our wins have come against teams that are not at full strength. That includes Minnesota with Conley. What I'll say is this, is that, again, the wins have come against subpar teams or teams that are kind of playing around. I haven't seen a win that's really super convincing that will change my opinion of the team. But we have got 4 wins. So there's some interesting things that I also want to talk about, which is Scottie being there has made our defense better when he's in the right spots defensively. And I do think that they are using him defensively in a solid way overall. So you're not really seeing him at point of attack. That's good. He's a little bit, as they call, a sweeper, or that I call it a roamer. That's the perfect role for him, because when he's engaged, he's able to clean up a lot, and it does make us better, especially given the current construction of the team. It is what it is, but he does do a lot defensively to help you, to make you better. So any chance moving forward, we're going to get to the end of the next week soon, but any chance that you have of making a moderately decent defensive squad that's even remotely close to average would have to come with him making major leaps and reducing the amount of disruptions that he is able to have in terms of his engagement level. Now, I want to quickly look at the week ahead, and we can get into what I just said. So Pistons, Pelicans, and I believe the Heat are it, and that would bring us to the end of the week. So actually, I'm lying. We technically play the Heat twice. So I thought there was a little bit of a gap. So out of those 4 games, where do you guys have them? And then we can get into the topic.
2-2.
Yep.
I think they split Miami games, and they might get one. I mean, how New Orleans right now is decimated right now. You know, and they could, I mean, between New Orleans and Detroit, they might get one of those 2. Yeah, 2-2.
I think Detroit's the easier one to see one, and then maybe one of the Heat. Adjustments happen, so we'll see. One of the games, I believe, is at home, so it does.
We're playing in New Orleans, if I recall, right?
Yes.
Yeah, we never played well there.
We did once when Boogie was there, and it wasn't televised and stuff. But anyways, yeah. No. Any thoughts before we move on what I just talked about?
Well, Scott, I mean, if you're asking for Scottie in this case to be kind of like a rim protector in some ways, where he's just coming from the weak side and just roaming around, kind of, putting people on notice. He did that a little bit at the beginning of the season last year, but it wasn't consistent. But then if I was the opposing team, I would just say, okay, I'll just bring up my guy and bring up Scottie's guy, and have him in the action where he's not as good as a defender, and then that takes away that advantage the Raptors might have defensively. It's kind of easy to deal with.
I mean, he did a good job in kind of disrupting Randall's running of the pick and roll. Now, Randall is not a traditional point guard, obviously, and they didn't have their traditional point guard, so it gets more interesting when you have a better maestro, so to speak. So I don't think we've seen enough to really assess whether it's good or bad, but the returns so far have been positive for sure.
Well, I don't know. What's your thoughts about what we discussed the other day after he came back, the starting lineup? Is that something you're going to see throughout?
I think you need to see it.
Okay.
Defensively, it makes you bigger, and that alone helps. I mean, just by having longer, better, bigger arms out there, even if you miss out on you don't have the perfect positioning, you're still able to gum up the works a little bit more than you would otherwise. And that alone can help, unless the person's completely abysmal, which he's not. So, I mean, from that standpoint, it's an improvement. I think also, closing lineups are closing lineups, and that's where it gets interesting.
Yeah, because that's we're watching the internal struggle of Darko.
Yeah, and I'm just purely talking about the defense right now. I think just focusing on the defense, Scottie Barnes coming back to the lineup helps you a lot.
Mm.
Coach, any final thoughts? As other than that, we will be talking about what there is for the next approximately 8 games, I guess.
Well, having Scottie back certainly helps this team. I don't think we get worse by having Scottie. I think he's going to need a bit more time to get adjusted and acclimated to what we've been doing lately. And when you add like the driver of the bus for all of this, it takes a game or two, certainly. But like Kenyon had said, Scottie's just his added size certainly will help this team because we're so small to begin with. And I just think with Scottie, especially in transition, I've always trusted him to make these good decisions. I'm going to be curious, too, about Davion Mitchell and his role moving forward. Davion Mitchell was one of the reasons you beat Minnesota with him guarding Anthony Edwards. It wasn't Ochai. People were trying to keep saying it was Ochai. To me, it was Edwards. Edwards was like right here the whole time on Anthony Edwards, especially in the fourth quarter. So I know they started Ochai in that game. I kind of wonder if they go back to Mitchell because in the last few minutes of the game, there was a play where Minnesota had a breakout. Nobody was back. It's usually the guards playing safety. We know he had point guard on the floor. Scottie's not used to doing that on defense. Ochai's not used to doing that on defense. So having Mitchell back on the floor, I think, is probably going to help, at least on defense for the time being. Because we know he moves his feet well. There's other issues on offense, but I really don't care about that right now. I think Mitchell in the lineup helps this team, at least if he's guarding a big-time guard, not a forward, not like a Tatum or Brandon Ingram, who we're about to see. That's probably going to have to be a Scottie or an Ochai or a Mobo at times.
Really good points. I think Mobo's an interesting one. You are seeing his minutes shrink. I think there's obviously the offensive limitations are what they are. And until they improve, just like Shed, you're just going to see a limit to the minutes. And to be fair, they do need the development. And I think from a Shed standpoint, just to shift things away from Mobo for a second, I think we saw really quickly on the 905 the difference that having someone who is more of a distributor makes, especially in an offense that doesn't have a traditional hierarchical type structure. Having someone to structure things a bit and organize things helps tremendously, I think. And, you need that in your development program. We don't have many. But yeah, I agree with all the points that you guys made. To move on, I think we should discuss quickly, no pun intended there, the fact that the next 8 games dictates your season. Because that's around the 25 game mark. We said the 20 game mark. We'll kind of push it up ahead just because everyone keeps saying the East is so bad, East is so bad. Fair enough. Let's go 25 games. That would be the Knicks game on December 9th. And the reason why it's interesting, if I look at the landscape of the league right now, is focusing on our conference. We are now 4-12. The teams that are behind us are 3-12. Sorry, 2-12, and the 76ers are 3-12. They just got a win, I think, within the past 2 days. I think we can definitely see the 76ers will be much better than they are right now. That's probably the easiest thing to say, because not that long ago, we were in the same place that the Bucks were. So as other teams have moved around, we've kind of stayed steady. what's interesting, because now the Bucks are 8-9. They're now 500. So a lot can change in 8 games. You know.
Oh, they're not trading Giannis now?
They're not trading Giannis now.
Oh, okay. Just double checking. Okay.
So panic
You're
is
not
over.
getting Giannis now?
Yeah, see you go.
That was never happening.
That was all the rage.
So that's what I would say is there is a lot from that standpoint moving forward. If you can outwin other teams in the next 8 games, it could put you in realistic striking position of a play-in. But we can't end, like, between now and game 20 even, we can't be 5-15. That's probably not good enough. So how many games do we need to win to put us in striking position, in your opinion? And then let's look at if it's possible. Beyond, or actually, coach, this time, I'll go with you. Because we're 4-12.
So I slightly disagreed with you that it's the Knicks game. I would say it's the game after against Brooklyn. You get a 10-day break, and when Brooklyn comes into town, Brooklyn, I only say this because the Knicks are better than us. I would say that they're a really good team. That's kind of hard to measure that, but against Brooklyn, I think might be the key. If you lose that game to Brooklyn and you lose that game to the Knicks, well, January is going to be a very interesting month. Let's just put it that way. So
But coach, question. While I agree with you, because we talked about this, the Nets game is important from a lottery standing standpoint if they decide to blow it up and are able to blow it up. However, on the flip side, what is one game when you're already at game 25 versus game 26?
True. I think it's more from a morale standpoint, too. There's losing to New York and there's losing to Brooklyn. I kind of wonder if players are still going to want to buy in leading up to the new year and into the new year in particular. Like, the players at the end of the day, they're going to play. I'm just more looking at the perception of losing to New York versus losing to Brooklyn is a little different. I do think you got to probably go 500 over this next stretch, and that's going to be difficult to do. I'm just looking at the standings right now, and in the play-in, we got Brooklyn at 6-10. So if you're about 500, you're still within striking distance of that.
Right. And before I go to beyond, I'll just say the one thing that most of us don't do on a regular basis is they'll look at the Raptor schedule, but they're not looking at other teams' schedules and seeing how they're winning and losing and who they're winning and losing against. So, because that plays in, you know, we're not the only one with the schedule. Beyond, I'm gonna go to you now and ask you your thoughts, but just so people know, in the meantime, so people know within the next 8 games for the Nets, I'm seeing that they are going to be playing the Bulls, they're going to be playing Utah, they're going to be playing the Spurs, they're going to be playing us, so we could call that a toss-up. They are also, and potentially the Pacers are kind of a little bit in disarray right now with all the injuries. They also have a somewhat interesting schedule. So, beyond your thoughts.
I mean, sometimes some things come down to basic math when it's all said and done. Like, it doesn't matter how much you want to think, well, this team or that team. You just have to look at it from, and this exercise works better in baseball because of how long the season is. You can project and say, hey, you got to win at this percentage or this clip to get into X position.
Right, at game 40 in, right. You're like, right. Okay.
And then race talk starts happening, or nowadays wild card talk starts happening. He's like, okay, I got to play at X rate to be in the mix when September comes. So you have to look at that standpoint. I did a little exercise the other day. Don't quote me on the math, but when I did it, they had 3 wins at the time. I said, okay, let's play argument's sake. Let's say they just go in the lowest possibility. Say they get to the 38 wins to get the 10 seed. That's about the range of 10 seed is, about 38 wins. You know, I said wins all said and done. I think I worked it out in this case with the 3 wins. They had to go like 35 and something, him at 35 and 20 something, which is going at a rate of about 600. Every loss that you have, that percentage goes higher and higher.
I agree. I agree. It's going to be quite a lot of winning, but I mean it's possible. I mean, for argument's sake, and I'm going to kind of stick it right down the middle here. Say you could get to the playoffs with 35 wins. After this next 8 games, to that point, yeah, like it's like if you aren't closer to 10 wins, right? It gets a lot harder to get up in the standings, essentially.
Yeah. Like we're talking about 8 games, which will put that at what then? And so you're looking at them to be about 10 and 15?
Yeah. And I'll just say for people so that they know, when you look at the actual Raptors schedule, I know people act as if, okay, after the next game, things get interesting. And they're talking about Houston. It's like Houston is like dab smack in the middle of the Western Conference play-in or playoffs.
Like, honestly, playoffs. At this point, how things have skewed so far, I don't think you can assume any Western Conference teams will win.
No, and especially if you are someone who said that the East is bad, well,
you have it both ways,
right? We're in the East, and we're not at the top.
Yeah, but at the same time, well, I'm kind of agreeing with you. We're 2.5 games back of Miami. Miami's in 6th spot right now, and I'm looking at some of the teams above us. I'm not saying these teams are that we're better than them, but they don't really frighten me because these guys, like the East from 6 down, is kind of bad. It just is. Miami, it's Chicago, it's Brooklyn, it's Charlotte, who now has Grant Williams. So he's playing really well with what he's done for the year. We all know some of these teams have injury problems. Ben Simmons is back to not playing well, and I know with them it's more Dennis Schroeder, Dennis Schroeder, Cam Thomas. These guys are playing well, but it's still Brooklyn at the end of the day. There is a world where you kind of probably do okay against some of these teams in the East. And the Pelicans game, if there's any game you're going to try to beat the Pelicans with no Zion and all the injuries that they have, it is going to be this one come Monday.
Yep.
Okay, but here's where I'll push back on you, Coach. Those teams that you're talking about are slightly ahead of the Raptors right now. As you said before, they have injuries too. So the way I look at it is, whose ceiling is higher when they get their injured players back? Is it Charlotte getting their front line back with Richards and Williams? Or is it us getting Kelly Olynyk and Bruce Brown? Right?
It depends on Mark Williams. He's been out all year. Like, when is he coming back?
Hey, right. So those are the things I look at, right? It's like, okay, Jimmy Butler's been out for most of the season. Whose ceiling is going to get higher in this case? A healthy Jimmy Butler coming back in Miami?
I was going to bring up the fact that Miami, of all the teams, I don't include the Pacers in this but Pacers? Miami. Well, I'm expecting them to get better, but I don't think Coach mentioned the. I don't think he mentioned the Pacers anyway, so that's why I'm just saying, taking them out of it, focusing on the Heat. The Heat, when healthy, can punch up. I always use that term, punch up, and they can punch up.
Right.
They do this every year. Yeah. So at the end, they're going to be there. Come hell or high water.
I think Milwaukee will get better when they get Chris Middleton back.
They're 8-9. Right. Milwaukee's not. They're gone. They're done. They ran past us.
But what I'm saying is they're going to space out even more when Middleton comes back.
Yes.
Right. So there's less teams that you think you can quote catch. Same goes with Indiana. Right. Yeah. So teams that right now look like they're catchable is like, no, they're not that catchable right now.
The way I look at it is like, the next 8 games gives you a puncher's chance to punch up yourself, because essentially the tiers will form by game 25. Tiers have formed. Right,
because like it's back the same guys, the same usual suspects we see all the time that's playing in the East. Atlanta, Chicago, how you do it, right?
Yeah.
So RU is good, and Charlotte's probably now in that play too in some form or fashion. Even my Detroit Pistons are in play.
Charlotte's 1 game behind Atlanta.
Right, and Detroit. So when I look at in this case here, how much is the ceiling for Toronto versus those teams? I don't know if it's much higher. And that's including if Quickly comes back. I don't know. There's a theory that Quickly might actually throw things the other way.
Yeah. And we can get into that another time.
Yeah, that's an X factor. Yeah, we keep pushing that discussion back, but
We do.
Yeah.
Next week, Basketball Rewind. And that's the thing. It's like when we're at full health, we also are fielding a team that is potentially less defensively able and capable than we are now. Because when Quickly's there, he's a worse defender than like Davion Mitchell, like on ball, for example. It's facts.
And away shots from other players that should get those shots.
That too with the game management, but I wasn't even going to go into that, but that factors in. So, I mean, we shall see. TBD. But I will say the next 8 games, again, will determine where you are. Because if you aren't able to raise yourself to a middling standard, and coach says around 500, and I agree, you might even have to play a little bit above 500, but you say you get 2 wins this week and 2 wins, you have to start chipping away at it. And like, okay, if I get another 2 wins here, that's how you get it. Mm-hmm. So, and then that's also how you build momentum. So we will see. Let's get into the mailbag and then let's get out of here. So thank you so much for the mailbag. Anyone who responded, we will go to Twitter first and we'll end with Facebook. So, first one I'm going to put on screen here is going to be from Will Braun. Shout out to Will, by the way. He says, what do you think Barnes' ideal role is on the team to maximize not only the team's development, but his development concurrently? This is a very good question because people always think about it from one standpoint or the other.
Mm-hmm. To maximize Scottie's place he's referring to the offense, is that right?
Just it's an open-ended question. You could go with offense, yeah, because we already talked about the defensive role already.
Yeah, I think to maximize Scottie's offensive output is you have to put him where Pirtle is. I think Beyond has said that. You have to put him as the hub. He should be having the ball a lot in his hands. We don't run enough screen and roll action. I know that was the big thing that Masai said in the open gym, him and Quickly. That has not happened. And RJ has done a lot more since that open gym as well. RJ has looked really good. I'm not trying to bring him up again, but the dynamic with Scottie and Quickly, and it mainly has been some Scottie, some RJ. So I think putting Scottie in as the hub where he is making decisions out of the high post, I think that would be more beneficial to him and this team. Kind of the Jokic role. It's not Pirtle. Pirtle's played well, there is no doubt. He's been maximizing his time. I think using Scottie as a hub in that regards would best benefit him and this team. Scottie's also got to work on his handles and get a better jump shot, quite frankly, too. The release has got to be better. It's got to be more quicker and more efficient if he really wants to take that jump, because we haven't seen it yet.
Okay.
Yeah, I pretty much everything Coach said. I just kind of said it last week. I said, I kind of said it kind of cheekily. I say, hey, man, they wanted to actually improve and help Scottie and help the team at the same time. Play Scottie at the hub in the second unit. Lo and behold, what happened? The second unit came out there. I gave a text to you guys. Hey, they must be listening to the show. They played the second unit as the hub. So that's good to see. As I said before earlier in this episode, I would love to see more pick and roll with Scottie involved, but I just know I'm just pretty much yelling in the sky to nothing because pick and rolls just don't exist on this team pretty much, except for a few occasions.
I mean, I've been asking for him to be involved in pick and rolls as specifically as a screener for how many years?
I've given up on that. Maybe you could get some mismatch opportunities for some post-ups for him. So like in the Denver game, that would be another way to do it as well, too, which I think will help everybody. Those are my thoughts on it.
Yeah. I mean, I agree. We've talked about it a number of times. I brought it up, and others have as well. I personally just think have him in the high post, have him in the Pirtle role. Unironically, if there was a trade for Pirtle, which we will get into much further down the line, closer to the trade deadline, of course, that type of thing. But if there was a trade for Pirtle, he would be the obvious person to play center. And I think defensively, there's some issues because I don't like the pounding that it would take on his body. But offensively, it could actually make you better, to be honest, and better by a lot. It would help him out. It would help the team out. He's more of a threat to score in different spots and more aggressive when he wants to be than Pirtle. So when Beyond always talks about ceilings, the ceiling is much higher with him than with Pirtle in those exact same spots, to the point where you can't just play sole drop coverage, because at least he can occasionally hit a mid range. And as that confidence starts to build, it's like defenses are going to have to play it tighter and tighter and tighter on him.
Can I just say something for a sec?
Mm-hmm.
We're talking about putting him in the Pirtle role, and I get it. That's probably what he has to do a bit more, but the ball handling, the jump shot, that has got to come before that next step of development for him. I'm not trying to pick on him. I'm just saying he's the guy. He drives the bus.
Yeah.
That has to improve.
Yeah, I agree. Well, you know me. I stirred up a hornet's nest this season. I really don't care. Mind the pun, hornet's nest, because it was after the Hornets game. However, I will say this: I think the discussion we're having here is I think we're all kind of subtly just resigned to the fact, at least for the moment, he is what he is. So what do you do with him? Even the question, I don't want.
It's how do you maximize that and get if you wanted an all-star Scottie Barnes, how do you get to an all-star Scottie Barnes? This is how you get to an all-star Scottie Barnes.
Exactly.
When you don't have another all-NBA player or all-defensive player level person on this team, and no offense to RJ, I don't see RJ as an all-NBA player.
We're working what we got, Coach. That's all I'm saying. We work with what we got.
Yeah. So, yeah, sorry, Coach, you were going to say.
No, that was it. And like you, I don't really see RJ as an all NBA player. I know I got the jersey on. I love Beyond has said, I love the lunch pail, bring your briefcase demeanor about him. I like that he was the #1 high school talent in North America and didn't exactly go his way in New York, and how he's responded. I really like stories like that. A guy's really responding well to adversity. So that's why it's one of the reasons why I gravitate towards RJ and just the relentless pursuit of getting to the basket and trying to get his shot. That is so key in this.
Absolutely. And to your point, Coach, I think Scottie does need to do a much better job of the handle and all that. Whether regardless of what role he's playing in. If he's playing in the post, it'll help him in the post. If he's playing in the high post, help him in there. Playing out on the perimeter, oh, you betcha. But we got to get to more questions. So, Rachel, shout out to Rachel.
Hey.
Rachel's Snag. I'm not going to say people's usernames because that's just way too difficult. Are there any centers that have caught your eye in the college system? Well, I will say there is one, and he plays with another person that we are trying to capture, if you catch the drift, and that's Maluwach. Maluwach, we noticed him in summer, I believe, in the Olympics, the South African team. He played there. He did a pretty good job. He actually showed that he could hit a pick and pop.
South Sudan.
Sorry. Apologies. And also shout out to Luol Deng with that one as well, for putting that team on literally his financial back, especially with all that they are going through in that country and area and everything. But yeah, he would be the one right now that I would say, it's early yet, but so far is the #1 center in this draft. And I think he will more than likely remain so. He has the size, he has the speed, he has some situational awareness. It's early yet in the college season to make huge kind of broad sweeping strokes about it. But what I would be looking for is, can he keep up the aggression, and will Duke put him in situations that will allow him to show a little bit more of his offensive package than just pure pick and roll? Any thoughts from Beyond? And then Coach Beyond says no. So Coach, any thoughts?
Yeah, he's the guy. I mean, I am curious to see where he lands in some of these draft boards. They've been kind of all over the place. Yep. So he seems to be the bit of the wild card at the moment. So
yeah, Maluwach. I'm saying his name right now because I watched the Duke in Arizona. I was calling him Malik. My apologies to his family and friends who may be listening to this. But Malawatch, I can see if we have a pick between 5 and 10 or 12, wherever it may be, he's on the board. It's not going to shock me if he would be their pick for multiple reasons. I won't really get into those. Another guy I'm kind of looking at as well, and I got to give our friend Tyler a shout out for this, and he's interesting, is Derek Queen out of Maryland. I think he's 6'10", 6'11", and he's putting up big-time numbers. I don't know if he's a freshman or a sophomore. I can't remember, but this guy can play. He can play basketball. So he might be another guy if we have a mid-teens or 20s pick and he's on the board, because this draft is so deep with wings and guards where there aren't many bigs in this draft. So they're going to be dime a dozen to find.
Hey, the Turtles getting frisky this year. All right. Sorry, I had to play a shot. It's the old ACC rivalry. I know they don't play, but so I got to take a shot, Maryland.
All good, all good. So yeah, hopefully that answers your question, Rachel. We will definitely be covering these prospects fairly soon on Basketball Rewind. It is what it is.
On these 2 weeks, it can be
the next 2 weeks. It's draft talk.
I'll just make one more comment.
Okay.
On that. Mm-hmm. You can't teach 7'2", 260. Someone's once said about Charles Barkley, you can't move the big body, and they're right.
And he's not someone that needs to slim down either.
No. He'll put muscle on. He'll put weight on as he gets older as well. So let's just keep that in mind too, moving forward. For a team that lacks size, he's got some size that we could use. And
he plays aggressive. And the other thing that I notice is if he doesn't get the ball for whatever reason, he doesn't pout the other way. And I think that's important. We saw it with Wemby the other day. Everyone says I pick on one person or the other. We saw it with Wemby the other day. Didn't get the ball back. Didn't even bother trying to rebound. Although, in my opinion, he was the only person down there, so there wasn't really anyone to rebound to. But yes, you got to feed the big man, but also the big man sometimes you need to do your job too. And one of the things that I noticed with that Wemby situation is like the guy that was on him. It's like you need to recognize where the ball needs to go. Okay, beyond. I will go to you, but then I really want to get through the rest of these questions.
You're stabbing my heart here with my boy, man. Killing my man, the man-child, Wemby, man. Come on, man.
Hey, I call a spade a spade. I got to call a spade. I got to call a spade.
Hey.
And you got to do better with that. And also, Stephen Castle, you got to do better. And to be fair, Rudy Gobert too. You got to do better, right? Rudy.
You hit me at Wemby and Castle in one shot. Okay.
Exactly. And I'll say back to the Rudy thing. Rudy had a moment. Sealed off Scottie Barnes. Randall said, And fair enough. Okay. But Rudy kind of slowly, he could have got out the lane. He was doing that to prove a point. And that was a stupid point with 5 minutes left in the game.
That plays summed up that whole mindset for Minnesota that entire game.
Yes.
I've never seen a team take a game so
unseriously. Yeah. Yeah. We'll and to be fair, none of those dudes have proven anything. So put your pants on and act like big boys, because most of y'all are actually making big money now too. Okay. See, people, I don't just give it to the Raptors. Andre is next. Andre asks, what do you think of the progress of Ulrich? Or Ulrich Champche?
Okay, the one person I asked that question to, man.
So it's Coach and I, basically.
Oh, the Chauncey whisperer here, man. Go ahead, Coach.
Oh, that's too funny. The progress of Shamshi. I like it. He's 18 years old. He's the age of a grade 12 kid who'd be in senior high in Canada or in the U.S. right now. And he's playing in the 905, so he's basically playing against a lot of, say, NBA caliber talent. Like, you're looking at the 13th to 15th man on most rosters in the NBA. Those guys are playing more or less in the G League. I think Shamshi is showing flashes of what he might be able to do in a couple of years. He's certainly a rim protector. We know he's athletic. He's fighting for rebounds. They have to really do this step by step with Shamshi. He is more, I knew he'd be raw, but he's a bit more rawer than I thought he was going to be. I like to see him develop the jump shot a little bit more. They're going to have to put him in actions to get that, because he's just playing on instinct. It's not a whole ton of skill right now, and you can't expect that from someone 18 years old, especially playing in the NBA. He should be in college right now, playing D1 basketball somewhere. I think Malawach and Shamshi actually are really good friends, and they were both looking at colleges at the time. Shamshi decided to go pro. Malawach decided to go to college, which I'm glad Malawach did, by the way. So I think Shamshi getting a lot of time in the 905. Brandon Carlson trade, I think, actually helped him because it could give him more minutes and more development.
Yeah,
I know Sam Vecini said on his show that he would not have done that. I think you have to take a risk on a kid at 57th pick in the draft. I think you can give a big kid like that 2 years.
sorry, Coach.
Find him.
Vecini said he wouldn't have done what? Selected him? Or...
Sam Vecini wasn't. Yeah, he was more or less. I don't know if I would have gone the Shamshi route, only because he's like those guys are so raw and they can take a while.
I mean, it's the 58th overall pick, and he got like a two-way contract. Like exactly. At that point, it's like I really don't want to go into like a whole diatribe about Bronny James, but it's like Bronny James, different contract because he's not on a two-way, he's on a guaranteed deal, but same kind of thing. It's like the 59th, 58th pick. Of course, we didn't have any more picks because certain people lost their picks this past draft. But the point is like when you are talking about the end of whatever, it's like essentially you might as well have gotten the dude undrafted. I don't care. I don't like at that point, like, and you and I, a long time ago, Coach, we talked and we said that dude's probably going to be a Raptor number one. And and number two, number two is this. The reality is we knew that this guy had a lot of talent and potential, but he's extremely raw. He's played maybe 50 total basketball games in his entire life, including stuff at the local Y, right? Like, he ain't play a lot of games. He's learning how to play. The only thing that I would want to kind of heavily underline and not understate is this guy is not ready for prime time. He should not be getting minutes, even though people are like, oh, it's development. It will hurt his development because it will hurt the team. It will put everyone in a bad context. I will also say, to your last point, I think that's why I keep going back to Shed. That's why Shed's important down there, because he makes sure sometimes Charlie Brown down there doesn't understand that it's not Lucy pulling the football from him. And yes, we do have a Charlie Brown Jr. on our team. Sometimes Kennedy Chandler doesn't distribute the ball enough and is trying to bet on himself. And not the Porter kind, but the Fred kind. You need someone that knows how to orchestrate the offense. And DJ Carton is probably one of the better offensively gifted players. He's going to be running a lot of the offense. So having someone that knows kind of how to put the pieces together and how to get guys involved is extremely important, not to just Shamshe's development, but everyone's development.
Here's a question for you both.
Mm-hmm.
Do you want an 18-year-old making 500 mistakes in year one, or do you want a 20-year-old making 500 mistakes in year three?
Who are you talking about? For the
Mr. Shamshi. Mr. Shamshi, but in general, too.
I mean, obviously, I'll just put it this way. The guy doesn't count against the cap, really. So who cares? I want to see him develop. He's like literally the Bruno 2 years away. But so like, I think it's more interesting next year. So yeah. Beyond your thoughts, and then we'll go to Sean's question.
I mean, I'll leave that to you two. I mean,
okay.
I think the point you made about the 58th, 59th, whatever pick he was, that's what I think of 58, 59th picks. I don't lose that much sleep about them.
Yeah, I feel like some people get super obsessed over like, oh my gosh, like blah, blah, blah. And it's like, when you're that deep in a draft, like, it's to, I think there was someone that was like, oh, the whole draft is a lottery. I'm like, no, not every single player is a lottery. But when you get that deep into a draft, it's a lot closer to being a lottery.
Yeah, you're just swinging for the fences and you hope something works out. It's like, okay.
Yeah,
that's all it is.
Like it'd be different if he was like had a guaranteed spot in like 4 years, guaranteed. It's like okay, now we really need to put pressure on like is he developing? But like he's not in that situation. So I would just say it's a fun watch. It's a fun watch down there, especially with like a couple of the guys from this year going down. So that makes it fun and just enjoy it. And he is progressing, but I've always said this: keep expectations low. They surpass them. You get a big surprise, and you get very happy. Okay, Sean, Blackula. Shout out to Sean. Thanks for the questions for everyone, of course. What is your thoughts on the potential trio of Grady, Scottie, Ace? And do you think that it's if that is a foundation for a championship? Coach, I'm going to go right back to you. Then I'm going to go in reverse order to Beyond, because I think Beyond will have a little bit more to talk about with this. But I will say really quickly, for this conversation, because of how Sean asked it, I will not bring up any other draft pick, because other draft picks could be interesting as well within this. So I'll just leave that and set the table there, Coach.
Very interesting question. Because it's going to be a certain possibility if you get between 2 and 4 in the draft, quite possibly. Now, on the floor, obviously we'll have to wait and see, but Bailey offers shot making that it's weird. He offers Scottie size, but like Grady shot making. And we're seeing this. I've never seen an 18-year-old in college basketball make as many tough shots as he has early. Now, I get it. It's not the best teams so far. We need to see him against a Kentucky, or we need to see him against a North Carolina, Gonzaga. I don't know if they're playing them. Rutgers is out in New Jersey, but we'll see. We need to see him how Villanova. Yeah, we need
Villanova's not been the best over the past 2 years.
But you're gonna have some the Big East, the Big East teams that are gonna be in the mix. We'll see. I can't remember our last track was in the Big East. I mean, Maryland would be one of the teams.
Maryland, yeah. So we need to see him against some of the better teams. All I know is he's a big time NBA talent. He's an elite athlete. And if you're asking me just now, which is a very small sample size, how he can look next to Grady and Scottie, I don't see why it couldn't work. Ace might have the most upside out of both of them, offensively anyway. The dude's 6'9", 6'10". He's 18 years old.
So
he looks like a young. He looks You're Jersey.
That guy.
Honestly, the size to me is the craziest thing.
That guy.
But Beyond, you go first.
Well, it's appropriate for me to wear this jersey today. Sean, appreciate the question. All right. All I say is I haven't seen that type of skill set for a young player. I said before until I saw this guy's jersey. And I'm wearing right here. His ability to put it on the floor, his ability in this case here to actually make tough shots. He already has 3-level scoring ability already. It's not something you say, well, maybe he can become that. No. He's a flat scorer. And funny enough, it's a bit of an old school type of archetype because a lot of the college kids nowadays, due to their age, due to how they kind of teach the kids nowadays, you don't have many raw scorers coming out of college anymore where a guy's just like, oh, he's a bucket getter. There's not too many dudes like that. You can look the last 5 years. They kind of grow into that if they are. But when you look at it, you have to kind of project it. Back in the day, there's bucket getters and you saw. I was like, that guy's going to put 20.
I'm okay. Can I just ask, to me, Brandon Miller?
He's one of the few. He is literally one. He's an aberration. Like Brandon Miller is an aberration. But he is exactly what you're talking about. Yeah.
This guy at the University of Texas that played in 2007. That guy was a bucket getter too. Right. He's probably a top 12, 15 player of all time, Mr. Kevin Durant. He was a bucket getter.
Similar measurables too. Keontae George as well, I would say.
True, but I don't think that. I love Keontae George, but he's not the level we're talking about here, man. He ain't talking about.
That's we're talking about T-Mac. Very fair.
Yeah, we're talking about T-Mac. Even Miller, That's a different level of score we're talking about. Where we're talking about that
What about
versus
AD in college?
yes, AD when AD was in college is like, oh, okay, that dude's gonna be a rocking 22 and 10, like just coming in the league. You
Cat.
saw that immediately, right? John Wall to some extent was like that.
Oh,
Some
John Wall
dudes
was
you just
nutty.
saw, right. You just saw, it's like, okay, that dude's gonna be a big time scorer. Obviously, AI, where he's like, boom, you knew it from the time you saw it, Georgetown from day one. Those guys don't exist that much anymore in college due to like how much power the coaches have, more so than ever before, due to the way they're trained from AAU up. In this case,
Right.
nowadays everyone just wants to shoot threes and try to get a layup, so no one develops any other parts of their game. So when you do see a guy like that, to Coach's point, as I told our friend Tyler, my eyes popped for the first time I saw him.
Yes.
And I'm not going to mention any other names in this draft, but he's the only one where my eyes popped. It's like, oh, this is different. This is different. So to go back to the original question, I salivate like I'm looking for a steak on a July day, my friend, on a barbecue grill. That's how much I'm salivating.
Yeah.
Sean. Please.
You put this guy next to Scottie.
You think about that is literally the three components that sit perfectly with each other. You have the facilitator, you have the big time alpha scorer, and you have the guy in this case here
who's like a multiplier. Yeah.
Multiplier leaks anywhere for leakage, boom, outlet. That's what you want. Click, click, click.
Yeah, I'll say this. Defensively with Ace, I just haven't seen enough, so we will see. Offensively, this would be the closest. This would fit better than OJ's glove. Okay, a lot better. The glove would fit, and I'll always leave it at that. Do I think it's a championship team? Do I have to edit that out? I'm leaving it in. So I think it's a little early yet. There might be a couple pieces left, but you're getting there. Now you've interested me. Now you've piqued my interest. So I'll
just say this, Sean. Going back way back to the beginning of this conversation. These 2 weeks, my friend, will determine a lot about your question. I'll just leave it at that.
Yeah, because even if you're like, depending on who's there, say you're the fourth pick, you might have enough to move up to 2. Probably not to 1, but you might have enough to move up to 2.
Yeah, that's possible. I don't think it. Well, it depends on the team.
Yes,
it depends on the team.
Now I'll say this. This is my hope and prayer to this front office if they are there. You've done a decent job at sometimes assessing who is the right person who could be a star. If you are not in a position to have that choice, but you can still get the person, do what it takes this time. Don't do what you did with Giannis or Shea or other ones where it's like, oh well, we can go get that down the road. There may not be a down the road. You just go get the dude. That's my only hope at the end of the season. What I will say about Ace is this. There's a lot of things behind the scenes. I'm hearing really positive, good things. We just have to get the full, complete picture. But we will be talking about him soon. There is an interesting dynamic between him or Cooper, who would be the number one that we would take, that we will discuss here on Basketball Rewind. We have one last question that's from Facebook that I want to get to.
I'll just say in this case, you might take for number one. I ain't sure if I'm on that same train with you.
Hey, this is why it's an interesting discussion. Last question is from James. I'm not going to read the full question, but I will say thank you, James, for the kind compliments. We will start with his actual question, which is, my question is, do you guys think the strengths and the weaknesses are based on the Raptors? Basically, like, what do we think the current strengths and weaknesses are based on the current roster that exists right now, as well as what do you think the Raptors need to improve for the future? I'm going to focus on the immediate future to answer this question in terms of within this season, and then maybe at the draft. Reverse order. Beyond, I'll let you go first. Strengths, weaknesses, and immediate to draft improvement.
Strengths. They have a couple guys.
Like not much.
No, there's some strengths.
I'm teasing. I'm teasing.
Yeah, no, it's not as clean in this case in the strength side. They have a couple of guys on this team, a few guys that can get you 30 on any given night, which is something you can't take for granted. How they're deployed is probably my question with it more than anything else. But overall, they do have some guys. That's a good starting point. There's some young fellas that show some promise, but we'll see. I think that's also potentially strength. I think it was a good draft overall. Weaknesses, I think we've kind of gone over this pretty good, but there's a lot of them. There's no real major. I mean, RJ's playing the role of the top scorer, alpha scorer, whatever you want to call it. Don't know if that's really the place you really want to see him in the future. We have no front court. We lack centers. We lack bench depth. We probably, hopefully Shed could become a better facilitator and point guard over time. I think we all agree Davion Mitchell's probably a long-term answer for that. So the point guard position is still an issue as well, too. Yeah, they got a lot of spots to fill, man. I'll just put it that way. So we'll see.
Okay. I will say this before Coach goes. I don't think we have to go through all the weaknesses, but because I think you kind of outlined them pretty well. Rebounding and size is lacking. And so I think one of the things that is addressed through the draft, and that's one of the biggest differences. It's not the only biggest difference, but one of the big differences that you notice just on paper between last year's draft and this year's draft is a lot of those dudes are much bigger than the NBA average for their size, height-wise. So, Ace Bailey, 6'10". He's probably not playing power forward, I'll tell you that. So, if he's small forward, he's addressing a size. If he's a shooting guard, he's definitely addressing a size. We need to get bigger. And that would be the biggest weakness. And I think the biggest strength is our willingness to have enough people wear different hats on offense and defense. And that actually can be a strength. Coach, I'll go to you.
I think a strength that sometimes doesn't get a whole lot of talk is their ability to stay in games even when they're down. Like, they don't give up easy, this team. I know we kind of can make fun of them and poke fun, but they're basically been in every game except Cleveland, and I know there's one other, I think maybe against the Lakers. Most every game they've been in, or even they've made it interesting, because we'll always joke with the fake comebacks and stuff like that, but for a tanking team, they've made it interesting. Most games have been. So I'll give this group credit. They haven't. It doesn't seem like they've tuned out the coaching staff yet. And I know something a little bit about this, about coaching a team that had 4 to 5 of the players had torn ACLs almost halfway through the year. It is not easy to try to coach a team where basically you have 7 or 8 players and that's it. And trying to really build on the losses, it's very tough for a coaching staff to do. So far, despite all the injuries, it seems like the coaching staff has got at least that out of them. The weaknesses, you guys have talked about it as well. We need more size. Stop turning the ball over. I like, in theory, how we press most teams, either full court or three-quarter court. You have to be careful about how you do that as well, because you're exerting all this energy. But if you play stupid basketball by fouling a lot, then it's hard to continue to play that basketball. It's even harder, even sometimes, for the bigs to do that if you're in bonus all the time. There's been a lot of games this year we've seen this team in bonus halfway through the quarters, and it really slows it down. Most of these teams we played are pretty good free throw shooting teams, so there's a lot of things they got to clean up throughout the year and hopefully next year. I always think there's a time and a place to press and to trap, either in the corners or the coffin corners around center. Nick Nurse did that to the extreme. But I just think this is going to come more with experience and personnel probably in the future. You got to get bigger at the guard position. We're not very big. We can 6'2" and under at the guard position. As Beyond says in the NBA, no Beyond said he likes big guards. Everybody wants a 6'4" or 6'5" guard. But if you're going to find one, the NBA is the place to be.
Agreed. I think that covers it all. I think there's some interesting conversations, like the Quickly conversation and whatnot, that we will leave for the future. Thank you, everyone, again for the Mailbag episode. Without people liking, commenting, and subscribing, don't know where the show would be. It does also help us to support the show, helps it to grow. The show is still growing. And, you know, the next big goal is obviously the 500 mark for YouTube. So help us to get there. Leave a comment below whether you liked it or not. And hope everyone is well. Take care and stay well and enjoy the rest of the 8 games that are to come. And then we'll talk again. Take care. Peace.